Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to our community meeting for April. We are already in Q2, depending on how you count quarters, but yeah. And usual agenda, introductions, things we shipped, demos, presentations from the community, what we're doing, community news, and Q&A. In general, if you are new to the meeting and you want to present yourself, it would be great. So we kind of get to know each other. And in general, we ask you to tell us. So this is us. You probably know us. But if you want to present yourself, where you are, where you're based, what you're doing with FGA, that would be awesome. And if not, we just can move forward. There's a few new faces here. So that's what I'm asking. Hi, Martin. Just in time. Hi, Martin.
I
How
was
you doing?
I was in perhaps in an other link meeting. I was in my calendar and this it's
I'm
no.
sorry. Yes, we moved to this one a few months ago. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, okay. So sorry about that. Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah, I'll introduce you at the right moment. But thank you for joining. Okay, good. So perfect. Let's go. So these are things we've been shipping lately. And this is light, but yeah, we shipped a few versions of OpenFGA. In one of them includes an experimental version of AuthZEN, which is a new standard for authorization that Martin is gonna hopefully show or share how they are using it in his company, his projects. We keep working on ListObjects, improving performance, and fix a few things with PG Bouncer. We are going to deprecate the playground just because there are some things that are not secure in the way we are deploying it in OpenFGA. So we're going to have an alternative solution. And as other projects, we are getting reports of people exploring vulnerabilities with open source tools. So and getting those reports and fixing them, which is great. But we've seen a few here and there, and we also our JavaScript SDK also was using Axios, so we were able to block the upgrade, so it never was shipped with a broken version. But we took care of all of those things for you. And we are doing a lot of work with the Helm charts. We might have some time to discuss that later if anyone is interested, because we have a few changes that we're making, and we love to get your feedback there. And so Carla has been working on a Ruby SDK together with Steven, which I don't see him here. And I don't know if you want to share what it's about. I can stop sharing and you can take it over.
You can continue sharing. I'll just
Okay, I continue.
because I'll be quick. So hi everyone. I'm Carla, for those of you who don't know me. And for the past lots of months, I don't remember, me and Steve have been working on a Ruby SDK, kind of like a side project, very much a community driven effort for this SDK. And if you move forward, you'll see that, why we started doing it was basically personal interest. We both like Ruby a lot, and Ruby still, and Rails as well. They power many production systems like Shopify, GitHub, Basecamp, etc. So why not? And we wanted to make OpenFGA easy and idiomatic for Ruby developers. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the SDK because I want to be mindful of time. You can just install the gem by doing gem install OpenFGA, or just adding it to your gem file. For those of you who don't know, the gem file is basically where you install all of your dependencies. And then just import it in your code and start using it. In the next slide, you'll see how to create the configuration. So we try to make it as consistent as possible with the other SDKs. So apart from being idiomatic to Ruby, the classes and stuff are as similar as possible. We added both API token and client credentials for that. And what else do we have? Yeah, we implemented all of the endpoints. And you can see the documentation there. I will make sure to send a link to the Slack channel. But yeah, you can do basically anything. You can write tuples, you can run checks. The only kind of difference, if you can see here, is that it kind of looks like you're passing. If you go back to the previous one, to the check, it kind of looks like you're passing named arguments, but in Ruby, this is just a dictionary or a hash. And so it looks nice, and it also works very nicely, and I really like it, but that's, yeah, like a Ruby thing. Right. If you keep going, yeah, you can do back check. We have list objects. We have basically all of the API calls. You can pass options as well as custom parameters in the next one, custom headers, sorry. And yeah, I think one of the things we're missing for now is some retried and maybe, yeah, just improvements that are happening with the other SDKs now. In that link, you can find the source code of the SDK. We are very much looking for any contribution. If you want to open an issue, a pull request, if you have any feedback whatsoever, that would be very much welcome. And you can reach out through the OpenFGA Slack channel or, yeah, on GitHub. That would be nice.
Awesome. And you can also find it in Ruby Chat there.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you, Carla, for your quick intro. I know I asked you to be quick because we had Martin that also wanted to give the time, and we also want to cover a few things after Martin finishes. So Martin, I'll pass it to you. So Martin has been working. Let me introduce you. And he's the third time he presents in this meeting. He actually asked me if he can get a T-shirt because of that, and he deserves one, so I should get him a T-shirt. And I should just go to Argentina to do that, and it's worth it. And also, he's been a very active member of the OpenFGA community and in general of the identity community, in particular around Keycloak. So thank you for everything you've been doing in the project, Martin. And now, yes, please take it away and show us what you have.
Cool. Thank you, Andres, for the introduction. So quickly here. Well, the idea of the presentation, again, thank you for the introduction. And the idea is to start talking about how we can build secure agents with MCP and APIs. The idea of the presentation is to talk about, we introduce the idea of OpenID AuthZEN, which is an open standard that comes within the authorization space. And this is one of the latest features that introduces by OpenFGA, which is great. The main idea, because when we usually dealing with open standard, is that we can apply the same approach, the same authorization standard across the entire stack. So this is the main idea when you are on top of open standard. So in the next one, quickly here, because well, I have been working in the identity space for almost 20 years. I'm the CTO and identity architect at Tuhan Identity. We focus on the identity and access manager space. And the last time I shift toward identity platform, more related to the security side. I usually ended up working with open source software. This is why I'm part of the Keycloak community and OpenFGA as well. And usually we build on top of open source software or enhance the platform, or we build your own identity platform. And we have experience as well with the commercial AIM side. Okay, I'm going to start with the next one. When I start talking about authentication and authorization, you can move to the next one, Andres. I try to explain the problem in the next slide. I usually split the problem in two. Authentication, for the one who have been playing in the authentication space, nowadays we have open standards such as OpenID Connect and OAuth. So we are delegating the authentication toward the identity provider, and hopefully there you have a phishing-resistant authenticator. But I would say that we are able to handle the authentication stage with, as I said before, OpenID Connect and OAuth. When we move toward the authorization, so far we are dealing with these challenges, which usually we're dealing in the next one with the security and compliance. I would say this is the first one. And then the idea of the presentation is to try to put focus on the open standard and interoperability. This is the main idea of OpenID AuthZEN, to give you a way to try to solve this problem. And we usually deal with authorization complexity and fine-grained authorization at different layer of the journey. But again, the idea of the presentation is to try to tackle the idea of having an open standard and interoperability between the communication between the policy enforcement point and policy decision point. So in the next one, because I'm going to try to talk about agents. So for me, there is no other way to talk about agent if I'm not introduce the idea of MCP and open standard, just to give a general context. So at the beginning, we're going to see in the next slide that we usually exposed the information with APIs, but nowadays we have different ways of exposing the information. Basically, the agent can use MCP, which is an open standard that allows to the agent to do the execution of the resource on behalf of the user. And the main idea is that the MCP host is where the agent lives. You can use Cloud, Copilot, or your own agent. Then you have the MCP server, which is exposing the capabilities to the agent. It could be tool, resource, or prompt. But one of the most important things that the API layer remains the same. So no matter if you're using an application or an agent is talking with an MCP, then we must protect the API layer. This is why we are going to see here that we are going to apply policy enforcement point at different layers. It could be at the agentic AI layer, the MCPA layer, at the API layer as well. So just a little bit more about MCP. As I said before, at the beginning, we usually expose the data over APIs or microservices. Nowadays, with the idea of agentic AI, we can expose the information towards MCP, which basically we're exposing the capabilities to the agent. And nowadays, we can expose application over the MCP with the idea of MCP apps. MCP apps is an extension on top of MCP, which is give you a way to expose application while using the agent. But again, no matter if we are talking about APIs, MCPs, the idea that we are dealing with the same security problem is basically we are trying to define if the actor, it could be an agent of a user, can execute an action on behalf of the user or can act at a protected resource. A double click here with MCP, I would say that introduce the problem that we are dealing with, perhaps with OAuth at the idea of the scope. So it's not easy basically to apply fine-grained authorization with the scope. There is no way to do that. This is why we are using OpenFGA as the fine-grained authorization layer. This is one of the points. And then we usually deal with a multiple hop problem because the agent is using an MCP server, then the MCP server is accessing the APIs. So we have multiple hubs while implementing the journey. And the last point is no matter if we are in an API layer of the MCP layer as well, we have to solve the fine-grained authorization, and this is how we use OpenFGA in this case. Okay. This is my, let's say, understanding about the current situation about the open standard. Here I'm talking about agents, but I'm going to use the same standard if I have to expose if I going to expose an API. But here to quickly go over the chart, I used to explain the agent if we are in the A2A because it's based in agent to agent of the MCP case, and the MCP case I usually split the process in two on behalf of the user or autonomous agent. I'm going to cover the interactive case on behalf of the user, and then we are going to apply the common identity standard. So we are going to use OAuth and OpenID Connect. OAuth was the adopted standard within the MCP community. So if you want to expose an MCP, you have to adopt OAuth. There is no other way to do it. So I'm not going to cover all the single standard here, but I want to say that we are going to apply the core standard that come from OAuth and OpenID Connect. And then we are going to extend the authorization capabilities with OpenID AuthZEN, which is a new standard that come here in order to help us to solve the authorization decision in a standard way. In the next one, I'm going to go quickly over the core standards. We have OpenID Connect, which is basically a standard that comes to help us in the authentication stage. It's basically on top of OAuth. And then we are going to apply OAuth as the access delegation standard. This is the core. The first one is going to help us to prove who the agent or agent is. And then on top of OAuth, we are going to have the access delegation stage, which is basically defining what the agent or app can do on behalf of the user. That's the core. OpenID Connect, authentication, OAuth, access delegation, and then we are going to use the access token. We're protecting the MCP or APIs-based OAuth. And then in the next one, finally, I'm going to introduce the OpenID AuthZEN. So once we have the core standard, which is OAuth and OpenID Connect, we're introducing OpenID AuthZEN. OpenID AuthZEN comes from OpenID Foundation, which is great, the one that ended up defining OpenID Connect. And OpenID AuthZEN is basically, simplifying the idea, is going to give you a standard message between the policy enforcement point and the policy decision point. So as I said before, OpenFGA ended up adopting, as an, I believe, experimental feature so far, adopting new endpoints that come from OpenID AuthZEN in order to expose this new endpoint to have a standard message between those components. And then on top of that, we have the authorization model, which is in this case is freeback because OpenFGA is based Zanzibar. Okay, in the next one, I usually try to explain the authorization component based on the P*P architecture. So I usually try to explain that the first component is the policy enforcement point. It could be a gateway, it could be the MCP or your API, but basically it's the first component that is going to enforce the authorization decision. And then we have the policy decision point, which is in this case OpenFGA, which OpenFGA is going to use their own authorization model, which in this case is freeback. We have in the middle, basically the blue line. The blue line is the open standard, which AuthZEN define this kind of a standard message between the policy decision point and the policy enforcement point. And thanks to that, we are going to achieve interoperability. One of the key benefit that we are going to see in the next slides is like when you are on top of an open standard. I was saying, when we are on top of an open standard, it happens the same when you want to use OpenID Connect. It's going to give you, the first thing is interoperability, which is great. Then we are able to apply the pattern of decoupled authorization towards the OpenFGA. At the same time, we're able to apply the pattern. We're going to see in the next slide, but we are going to apply externalized authorization because we can use a gateway in front of the MCP or API in order to delegate the authorization decision. But one of the main keys that here, on top of OpenID AuthZEN, we can talk with different PDPs, with different authorization model in a standard way. Okay, this is the pattern quickly here. I usually try to explain the authorization pattern in 3 layers. The first one is the legacy. Let's say when we usually use the authorization decision in the code, we don't want to do that. In the pattern 2 is when we are decoupling the authorization. The idea is that we are delegating the authorization decision towards an external service, in this case, OpenFGA. And then the pattern 3 is when we are able to externalize authorization, usually through an gateway. It could be an API gateway, AI gateway, MCP gateway, whatever the one to choose is, but we are externalize the authorization towards a gateway. Our recommendation is to try to follow the pattern 2 and 3 for agentic AI, and at the same as the API security side, we are externalizing at the company authorization with OpenID AuthZEN. Here is the diagram that you will find in the with OpenID Connect, but it's quite common to see in the authorization side. Basically, we have the application or agent is the same for me. In this case, I'm doing the enforcement of the AuthZEN policy enforcement point at the gateway layer. We have this standard message between the policy enforcement point and the PDP, in this case, OpenFGA. These standard measures, I'm simplifying the idea, but come with the AuthZEN subject action resource context. As you can see here, it's quite similar to the one we have in OpenFGA. In OpenFGA, we have the user and then the relation at the object. Here we are saying subject, resource, action, but it's quite similar. And then we introduce the context as well for giving more information to the PDP. But the idea is that every single request goes through the gateway delegates toward OpenFGA. I usually use the gateway for the quartz grain authorization step. And then at the API layer or the MCP layer, we can apply the same approach. We are doing the fine grain authorization on top of the OpenID AuthZEN towards the OpenFGA. So we have this kind of multiple policy enforcement point at different layers of the journey, and every single PAP is on top of the standard. Okay, this is the endpoint that you will find in OpenFGA. I'm going to just put focus on the evaluation endpoint. Perhaps one of the difference in OpenFGA, because OpenFGA ended up using stores and the authorization model, that when you want to talk with the access evaluation endpoint, you have to specify the store ID. And then I believe that the authorization model comes within the header. It's an optional parameter. But this is how you end up talking with OpenID AuthZEN evaluation endpoint. And of course, you will have the well-known endpoint is quite common to use in the OpenID side. Is going to do the discovery of the endpoint from the IDP. You can do the same. You can apply the same approach with OpenFGA to do the discovery in real time about the authorization endpoints. What we have here, okay, quickly. Here I'm doing the enforcement at the gateway layer. So the application or the agent is making a request. The gateway is doing the first policy enforcement point. Basically, the gateway is parsing the API request on the MCP request is the same, extracting the subject, method, and resource, and talking real time with the policy enforcement point in order to enforce the policies at the OpenFGA level. The PDP goes towards the policy decision and then returns to the gateway if the subject is allowed or not, execute an action. And then we have the typical communication between the gateway and the API or MCP. We can apply, again, the same idea at the API MCP level. So the MCP or API can talk again over AuthZEN with OpenFGA, usually for fine-grained authorization decisions. Here's how we usually use a base model that comes with the identity governance platforms, which is usually the identity, organization, roles, relation between roles, relationship between groups, and so on. So this is the example. You enable the experimental feature on OpenFGA, and here's an example of the access evaluation request. It's quite easy to follow up. You have the subject, the resource, and the action. I usually ended up adding context, which is the time or perhaps the authentication mechanism reference. Basically, all information that come from the access token. This is identity stuff, but usually I usually add more context to the AuthZEN request. But again, it's quite similar to the one you end up seeing with the user relationship and object. Here is subject, resource, and action. Finally, or implementation. I usually do like a quick checklist because I'm an identity guy. I usually expose every single endpoint, no matter if I'm talking about MCP or API, is protected by WAF. I'm delegate the authentication toward the identity provider. It could be Keycloak in your case, or it could be Auth0 or Okta. But the main idea is that I'm delegating the authentication access delegation stage toward the IDP. And again, I'm doing the same idea with the authorization stage. I'm delegating the authorization now on top of OpenID AuthZEN, Open Standard. I'm delegating the authorization to OpenFGA, and OpenFGA is acting as the PDP. As I said before, in my experience, there is no way to expose an MCP or AI services and API with one policy enforcement point. In my experience, I have multiple policy enforcement points during the AI or API journey, usually coarse grain at the gateway level and fine grain at the API or MCP level. We adopt zero trust and we apply fine grain authorization with reback and pback as well. I don't know how much time I have left, but quickly, this is the implementation of the open source gateway that you will find in our site. But basically, we add on top of an open source API gateway, the implementation of OpenID AuthZEN. Quite easy to configure basically the endpoint of the PDP. We introduced the idea of the platform because I have additional feature for OpenFGA, like doing the discovery of the store ID, because I need it when talking with the access evaluation endpoint. And then you will find here the AuthZEN request, subject, resource, and action. Here I'm going to split the process in two. When you are protecting an API, you usually, if you want to use a gateway, you usually use the idea of path in order to protect the different endpoint. But then when you move towards MCP security, you usually have one endpoint, which is the MCP server. And nowadays, there is a way that you end up translating the MCP request towards the AuthZEN request. It's basically parsing the MCP request, grabbing the tool name, the properties, and the method, and you translating on the fly to AuthZEN request, and then the gateway is talking with OpenFGA in order to validate the policies. Here's my view. This is how we implement the authorization. As I said before, no matter if we are talking about an agent on top of MCP or the agent is talking directly with an API, OpenClaw proves that the agent can do both. So we are applying the policy enforcement point at the MCP layer and of course on the API layer as well, because you never know if the agent is going to talk about MCP or to talk about directly with your services. In both cases, I'm delegating the authorization decision towards, in this case, OpenFGA for the fine grain, and then I'm delegating the authentication on top of OpenID and OAuth. And you can apply the same idea at the MCP server at the API layer as well. You can delegate the authentication, access delegation, just-in-time authorization towards your identity provider, and then you can delegate the access decisions towards the PDP. And the last two, here is our agentic platform. We are using our gateways to expose APIs and or MCP. And in this case, no matter if I'm using my own agent or if we are using our MCP apps services, we apply the same principle. We expose the MCP requests with the gateway. The gateway, again, we are abusing OAuth. So the gateway is validating the token because the MCP server and the API is acting as the OAuth resource server. So the API or the gateway is going to validate the OAuth token, typical stuff that comes from the identity access manager side. I'm going to parse the token, extract the claim, and then build based on the claims the AuthZEN request, and then I have a communication between the gateway and the PDP, in this case, OpenFGA. The OpenFGA is going to go towards the data because we are on top of reback. So reback is basically policy as data. So go towards the relationship between the user, the roles, the organizations, and the groups. And then if the user or the agent is allowed to execute an action, comes with a true or false response to the gateway. And then the gateway is going to talk with the API. So, I believe this is the last one. What I'm trying to usually explain here is that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have open standard. We have OAuth and OpenID Connect. It's good to extend the identity core standard with enhancing functionalities like OpenID AuthZEN. on top of OpenID AuthZEN, we can use OpenFGA as the policy decision point. But I'm seeing that, again, no matter if we are exposing an agent, MCP, or APIs, like some kind of building blocks, that I have my core standard, and on top of that, I'm adding and enhancing the security capabilities. And this is how we expose and build our products. I believe this is the, yeah, and then you will find some links about OpenID AuthZEN. I strongly recommend, if you are in the identity space, as the same as the authorization space, I strongly recommend, if you want to be a member of OpenID Foundation, you will find there identity specialists that are building this open standard. So it's great to be there. And then some links about the open source gateway, and articles are brought about authorization. You know, it was too fast. I want to cover everything. I know it was too much about talking about open standard or all and this kind of stuff. But again, for me, it's the only way that we can expose services in a secure way.
Awesome. Thank you, Martin.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, it's interesting because when AuthZEN started as a standard, there are two ways of thinking about it. One is I'm gonna now build all my applications, the applications I built internally, on top of standard like AuthZEN, so I can potentially replace my PDP in the future, right? And I wasn't a strong believer on that approach, because I think, for example, for OpenFGA, you need to write data to OpenFGA. You have an authorization model. Those things are hard to migrate to another service, right? Even if you're using AuthZEN to do authorization checks. On the other hand, there was a space where there are a lot of places in the infrastructure where you want to check for permissions. So having a standard for that, that is useful, because now every API gateway, MCP gateway, can standardize on AuthZEN, and then it can call OpenFGA or something else. So I think that integration use case is interesting, and that's why we are kind of trying to make it work with OpenFGA. Started as an experimental feature, mostly because I wrote it, and engineers don't trust me, so they wanted to see how far this works.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, go ahead.
I agree with you, Andres. We are using, just to give you another example, I mean, we are using OpenFGA for real-time authorization decision, because I'm going through the data, which is great. I'm going through the data. I'm not picking nothing from the token, let's say, in some cases. I'm going through OpenFGA for real-time. Just to give you another point of view, is I'm using OpenFGA from Rebug, and in some cases, I'm using PBAC as well. So it's give you, let's say, a common open standard to play with different authorization model at the same time. It's another way of thinking, yeah.
Yep, makes sense. Okay, thank you very much, Martin. And for time, we'll post the presentation in YouTube as a video. And I will just we have a few minutes, so let me wrap it up. So a few things on the community side. So I was a couple of weeks ago in Amsterdam presenting about OpenFGA. We have a lightning talk. So Siddhant is a member of the community. He's been working with us a lot for years, and he actually was the one who proposed this lightning talk. He couldn't make it, so I deliver what he wanted to deliver, right? And so I just wanted to thank him for presenting it, and for the opportunity of representing him there in Amsterdam. I actually did another presentation in New York in an MCP in Dev Summit last week. You can search for this example. There's a video of the presentation here. I was going to play it, but we don't have a lot of time. That basically shows how you can do task-based and intent-based access control with OpenFGA. It's more an experimental approach. We're just seeing how it works. But I found the demo pretty fun to do and to see. It's 8 minutes. So if you just search for the repo and click the demo there, you might find it interesting. And there's another presentation in KubeCon in India that is not from us. It's from Rahul. So he's working at Equinox, and he has been building OpenFGA with Spiffy, and I'm looking forward to learn what he's been doing. So if you are in India, then it will be a good opportunity to learn more about different ways to using OpenFGA. And then some of my fun activities during the week is search for people doing OpenFGA things in GitHub. And I always find interesting things. There are a few of repos that are trying to build a better playground, which that implies that there's clearly a need of building a better playground, and we are working on that, and so it can be better integrated with OpenFGA. There's someone who's building an indexer, which is a feature that is pretty interesting that will help us would help in some higher latency scenarios. We haven't been involved with the person running it yet, but if you're interested in the scenario, and you might want to take a look at it and see if it works for you, if you want to collaborate with him and try to make it part of OpenFGA, it will be pretty cool if that happens. And there's also someone who's building an integration with OpenClaw. So if you're playing with OpenClaw and you want to see how you can make it work with OpenFGA as your authorization engine, there's also a space for you to do that. And also I'd love to learn. I didn't have time yet to try. There's so many things to try, but this is on my list. So that's it. Thank you very much. There's so much to the roadmap. Actually, I have to upgrade this slide. I didn't. So we keep working on performance improvements. So we ship more on ListObjects. We're preparing a big one that's gonna probably be out in 3-4 months. About kind of change a lot how we talk to databases, but we are not ready yet to share details. And then we are also working on doing some changes in the Helm chart. So stay tuned. We're gonna post some updates in our channels, so you can look at that and let us know how you think. One of them is we need to change the image we're using for MySQL and Postgres because the one we're using has been deprecated, and we need to find other alternatives. So that's it. I don't know if you have comments or questions. Now it's a good moment. Okay, friends, thank you very much, and we'll see each other in a month with more news for OpenFGA and hopefully another presentation from someone from the community. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye, all.